The door opened. Not all the way. Just enough for his face to appear in the gap. Older. Thinner. Sunburned. Wearing paint-stained shorts and a tired smile that froze the second he saw me. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then his eyes widened. And that was all the confirmation I needed. You, I said. The man I buried flinched. Behind him, I heard a woman's voice call from inside the house, cheerful and unaware. A child laughed. A screen door creaked. Life normal, loud and alive. Happened inches behind the man who had supposedly been dead for half a year. He swallowed. You shouldn't be here, he whispered. I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because after months of crying into pillows, after nights spent begging a ceiling fan to answer questions it never could, after standing over cold marble pretending grief had an ending, I finally had him cornered. I brought you something, I said, lifting the thick envelope in my hand. His gaze dropped to it. Legal paper. Heavy paper. The kind that ends lives, not with bullets or knives but with truth. You need to sign for it. His hands trembled. He didn't reach out. I can explain, he said, glancing back toward the house again. Please. Not here. Oh, here is exactly where we're doing this. I raised my voice just enough. The woman inside stopped moving. I could hear her footsteps now. Curious. Concerned. Too late. You died, I said calmly. You let me bury a stranger. You let me cry over an empty box while you built a brand new life with stolen money and a borrowed name. The door opened wider. The woman appeared behind him. Mid-40s. Kind eyes. Confused expression. Who is this? She asked him. He closed his eyes. I turned to her. My name is Evelyn, I said pleasantly. And I'm his wife. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Because once the truth starts falling, it doesn't stop. 6 months earlier. The first time I saw him alive, I was holding a bottle of cooking oil. I remember because it slipped out of my hand and shattered across the grocery store floor. Golden liquid spreading like a crime scene no one wanted to claim. People stared. I didn't care. There he was. Alive. Breathing. Comparing prices like the world hadn't ended for me while he quietly stepped into a new one. The man I buried. The man I mourned. The man whose name was carved into stone. My husband. He looked ordinary. That was the worst part. No dramatic music. No lightning strike. No apology waiting on his lips. Just a shopping cart and a confused frown as I ran toward him like a woman half my age and twice as desperate. I said his name. Loudly. Ugly. With all the grief still stuck in my throat. He turned. And when his eyes met mine, I knew I wasn't hallucinating. Same crooked nose. Same scar above the eyebrow he earned in his reckless youth. Same crooked finger he broke fixing a roof long before I ever met him. I reached for him. He stepped back. I'm sorry, he said gently. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. That voice had woken me for decades. That voice had argued over bills, whispered apologies, laughed at bad jokes, and promised forever. My name isn't what you think it is, he added. You should sit down. I didn't. I followed him instead. All the way out of the store. All the way into my car. All the way to a quiet street I'd never visited before. And there, I watched him walk into a house that wasn't mine. Where a woman kissed his cheek. Where children ran to him laughing. Where he was called something else. Something fake. That night, sitting alone in the dark house he'd left me with, I asked myself a single question. If he was alive, who did I bury? That question would tear apart more than a marriage. It would destroy a family. And by the time I was done answering it, no one would walk away untouched. Before I tell you how I followed my dead husband home, you need to understand who I was before that grocery store aisle cracked my life in half. I wasn't naive. I wasn't weak. And I definitely wasn't stupid. I was loyal. Which, as it turns out, is far more dangerous. I met him when I was young enough to believe hard work fixed everything and love always paid its debts. We built our life the old-fashioned way, slowly, stubbornly, with more hope than money. Our first apartment barely fit a bed and a dresser. The bathroom door didn't close properly, And the heater worked only if you kicked it twice and whispered encouragement to it like a dying animal. But we laughed. God, we laughed. He was charming in that careless way men have when they don't yet understand consequences. He had plans. Big ones. I believed in them so fiercely I gave up my own without even noticing. When our son was born, I told myself it was temporary. I'd go back to my work later. I'd reclaim my dreams after things settled. Things never settled. His career took off. Mine quietly disappeared. He traveled constantly. Always had a reason. Always had receipts. Always sounded exhausted when he came home. Like the world was personally conspiring against him. I never checked his phone. Never questioned his stories. Never imagined that a man who kissed me goodnight and complained about my cooking seasoning could be capable of living two lives at once. That was mistake number one. Mistake number two was trusting silence. The cracks didn't come all at once. They came politely, like guests who overstay but never announce themselves. Missed birthdays. Cancelled anniversaries. A phone that always seemed to buzz just out of reach. And my favorite. I'll make it up to you. He never did. Still I stayed. Because that's what women like me were taught to do. When the accident happened, I was folding laundry. That detail still makes me angry. Not because it matters, but because my life was mundane when his supposedly ended in chaos. The call came from a stranger with a rehearsed voice and sympathy that felt professionally measured. There had been an accident. Severe. They advised a closed casket. They said it would be better that way. I remember asking if he suffered. They said no. That was a lie too. The funeral was beautiful. Too beautiful. White flowers. Polished speeches. People telling me how strong I was, how devoted he'd been, how lucky I was to have had him. I nodded. I thanked them. I stood next to a grave that wasn't his, and let grief hollow me out from the inside. The house became unbearable. His chair stayed empty. His side of the bed remained untouched. I cried in places I didn't know tears could reach. And my son, my only child, held my hands and told me I'd be okay. You're not alone, Mom, he said. Another lie. Or maybe the cruelest truth of all. When I saw my husband alive, my first instinct wasn't rage. It was relief. For exactly 3 seconds. Then the questions came flooding in. Why did he look confused when I called his name? Why was he dressed like someone else's version of him? Why didn't he run? And why did he look calm? That night, after following him home and watching him disappear into a life that wasn't mine, I sat in my car and laughed. A sharp, broken sound that scared me. Because laughter is what happens when your brain gives up trying to protect you. I went home and spread our old photos across the table. Wedding. Vacations. Birthdays. I compared them to the man I saw that day. Every mark matched. Every scar. Every detail. There was no doubt. Which meant the only remaining question was, who helped him disappear? The answer arrived the next morning. In my kitchen. Holding a coffee mug. Calling me Mom. He didn't knock. He never knocked anymore. He let himself into my house like it still belonged to him. Which, in a way, it did. He had keys. He had memories. He had entitlement. My son stood in the kitchen doorway holding a mug of coffee like it was a shield. You look awful, he said. So do you, I replied. We stared at each other for a long second, circling something neither of us wanted to touch. Then I slid my phone across the table. I saw your father yesterday. He laughed. A short, nervous sound. The kind people make when they're buying time. Mom, he said gently, like you speak to a child or a patient. We've talked about this. Grief does strange things. I followed him home. The coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. I leaned forward. I watched him walk into a house that wasn't mine. I watched a woman kiss him. I watched children run into his arms and call him something they shouldn't have known how to say. The color drained from his face. He didn't deny it. That's how I knew. He sat down slowly, like gravity had just doubled. You weren't supposed to find out like this, he whispered. I waited. I had never been a screamer. Never a thrower of plates. Rage for me came quiet, sharp and focused like a blade. How long? I asked. Were you planning to let me grieve a lie? He rubbed his face. I thought if enough time passed you'd heal. I smiled. A tight, humorless thing. Did you rehearse that? Or does it just come naturally now? He flinched. And then finally he broke. He didn't die, he said. No hesitation. No poetry. Just the truth, dropped like a brick. My husband didn't die. I nodded slowly, like I'd just confirmed a suspicion rather than had my entire life detonated. Go on. He had another family, my son said. For a long time. Longer than you think. How long? He swallowed. Most of my life. I laughed. Not softly. Not sadly. I laughed like someone who just realized the joke had been on her the entire time. You knew, I said. Didn't you? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I found out years ago, he admitted. By accident. Documents. Bills. Things that didn't add up. And you said nothing. He begged me not to, he said desperately. He said it would destroy you. He said he was trying to fix things. I stood up. My legs felt strange, steady, but disconnected, like they belonged to someone braver. He didn't try to fix anything, I said. He tried to erase me. My son looked up, tears finally spilling. It was supposed to be clean, he said. Quick. He wanted a fresh start. A fresh start, I repeated. So he chose death. I let that sink in. Whose body is in the ground? He closed his eyes. A dying man, he said quietly. Someone with no family. He was already sick. It wasn't murder. I stared at him. You bought a corpse. He did, my son said quickly. Not me. He arranged it. I just helped. Helped. Such a harmless word for such a monstrous thing. And the funeral? I asked. He looked away. The casket had to stay closed. I felt my knees weaken, but I didn't fall. Not yet. How much, I asked calmly, did my husband take when he ran? A lot, he said. Enough to start over. And what did you get? He hesitated. Everything. The business. The house. Control. An allowance he'd handed me like spare change, while I mourned the man who was very much alive. I sat back down slowly. My chest felt hollow, but my mind had never been clearer. You didn't protect me, I said. You protected money. I was afraid, he cried. Afraid of losing everything. You lost me instead. Silence filled the kitchen. Thick. Permanent. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet street where neighbors waved and children rode bikes, blissfully unaware that my family had just imploded. You're going to tell me everything, I said. Everything. Yes. And then what? I turned back to him. Then I smiled. The kind of smile that means someone somewhere is about to regret every choice they ever made. Then I said, I'm going to take back what's mine. For 3 days I did nothing. No calls returned. No doors opened. No explanations given. My son left messages that swung wildly between panic and guilt. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he sounded angry. Once he tried to sound authoritative, like he still had the right. He didn't. During those 3 days, I did something far more dangerous than screaming. I thought. I replayed every conversation. Every financial decision I'd trusted him with. Every document I'd signed without reading because I believed love meant partnership, not suspicion. I stopped being the grieving widow and started becoming the woman who survives. On the 4th morning, I put on lipstick for the first time since the funeral. It felt theatrical, almost funny, like I was dressing for a role I'd never auditioned for, but had been forced into anyway. I drove downtown to a narrow building that smelled like burnt coffee and bad decisions. The sign on the door was peeling, the letters uneven, as if even they didn't fully believe in themselves. Inside, a man with tired eyes and a voice that sounded like he'd seen too much looked me up and down. You want answers, he said. I want proof, I corrected. He smiled. Those two things are never the same. A week later, the folder in my hands was thick enough to ruin lives. Bank records. Fake identities. Phone logs. Transfers timed perfectly around a death that never happened. And the final insult? Calls. Hundreds of them. Between my son and my husband. Before the funeral. After the funeral. During the months I couldn't sleep without medication. They talked while I cried. They coordinated while I mourned. I didn't scream when I saw it. I laughed. Because there's a special kind of humor in realizing you weren't crazy. You were managed. The lawyer didn't blink when I told her everything. She didn't soften her tone or offer sympathy tea. She listened. Then she leaned back and said, "This is not a tragedy. This is a criminal enterprise." I liked her immediately. She explained things carefully, precisely, like someone dismantling a bomb without theatrics. The fake death? Fraud. The money? Theft. The forged signatures? Multiple felonies. And the inheritance? Never legally valid. My son never inherited anything. Because there was no death. Which meant every decision he made afterward. Illegal. When she told me how much I could reclaim, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not joy. Not greed. Justice. And justice, I learned, is expensive. But worth every cent. We made a plan. A quiet one. No threats. No warnings. Just patience. I invited my son to lunch. He arrived hopeful, desperate, grateful I was finally calming down. I let him talk. I let him confess again, slowly, thoroughly, believing this was reconciliation. The entire time, my purse sat open on the table, listening, recording. When he finished, he reached for my hand. "I knew you'd understand," he said. I didn't pull away. I didn't squeeze back either. I simply stood. "Kiss your wife for me," I said gently. "And take care of yourself." He smiled. That was the last moment of peace he would have for a long time. By the time I got home, the calls had already started. Missed calls. Panicked messages. Threats. Bargaining. Silence. Then the knock on my door, furious, desperate, too loud for a quiet neighborhood. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the machine was already moving. And once justice starts rolling downhill, it doesn't stop for family. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the envelope I'd been saving. The one addressed to my husband, the man who'd died once already, and was about to wish he had stayed that way. I didn't rush it. Revenge, I learned, tastes better when it's served with patience. The envelope sat on my kitchen table all night. Thick, official, impossible to misunderstand. Inside were words that meant accounts frozen, names exposed, lies collapsing under their own weight. By morning, I was calm. That should have scared him more than anger ever could. When I drove to the house, the seafoam green one with the neat fence and the borrowed life, I parked 3 doors down and walked the rest of the way. The neighborhood smelled like fresh grass and detergent. Children rode bikes in circles. Somewhere a radio played something cheerful and wrong. Normal life. That's what he'd stolen from me. I rang the bell. Footsteps. The door opened. And there he was. Older than when I last saw him in the grocery store. Smaller somehow. As if living a lie had been physically expensive. He recognized me instantly. "Evelyn," he whispered. Hearing my name from his mouth felt like a bruise being pressed. "I came to deliver something," I said, holding up the envelope. His eyes dropped. Fear finally caught up with him. "You shouldn't be here," he said again. "Please. We can talk." "Oh, we're done talking." I stepped closer. "You let me bury a stranger. You let me believe my life was over while you quietly started another one. You took what was mine and handed me grief like it was charity." The woman appeared behind him then. The one I'd seen before. She looked from him to me, confused and already afraid. "Who is this?" she asked. I didn't wait for him to lie again. "I'm his wife," I said. "His legal one. The one he never divorced because that would have cost him too much." Her face drained of color. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I listed the things only a wife would know. The scars. The habits. The history. Every word peeled another layer off the man she thought she loved. When she realized the truth, she didn't scream. She simply stepped back from him. And that, more than anything, broke him. He dropped to his knees. Right there on the doorstep. Begging. Crying. promising explanations that arrived decades too late. I loved you, he said. I just couldn't choose. That, I replied calmly, was your choice. I handed him the envelope. Everything ends now. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some endings don't require witnesses. The rest unfolded without drama. Accounts frozen. Assets returned. Truth documented. My son was arrested quietly one morning. The way people who think they're untouchable always are. Confused, offended, suddenly small. He called. I didn't answer. He wrote. I read. He apologized. I believed he was sorry. That didn't mean I rescued him. Love, I learned too late, doesn't mean protection from consequences. Months passed. The house felt lighter, quieter. Mine. I sold what I didn't need, kept what mattered. I traveled to places I'd once been promised and never taken. I laughed again, real laughter this time, the kind that doesn't come from shock or hysteria. I slept without pills. I woke without dread. One afternoon, I stood in front of the tomb where I'd once cried and placed a small plaque. It didn't carry his name. It read, "Here lies the woman who believed a lie. She rests now. She is free." A year later, I heard he died for real. This time I felt nothing. No relief. No sorrow. Just closure. And closure, I discovered, is the quietest kind of victory. Today my life is simple, peaceful, honest. I trust carefully. I love deliberately. And I never ignore the voice that warns me when something is wrong. Because the day I buried my husband, I also buried the version of myself who thought loyalty meant silence. And the woman who walked away from that door, she never looked back. Please click the subscribe button, like, share and comment. This will encourage me to make more interesting stories. Also, let's know where you are watching from. Thank you and see you in the next story.